This time on Captain Chaos's laboratory, we're going to be working on a brand new, fully functional, currently, Headstone Mill Brewery. As you can see, everything's moving. You got the rotation, the rotation, the rotation, the up and down on the two here, and we got full lights and music. So, the reason I'm going to take this apart is trying to show people how to take it apart. Because there's a few out there that have some issues, and because of the limited production of everything, it's not always easy to get a replacement. So let's see about opening this thing up and finding where its weak spots are and how we can get things fixed. I'm going to fix this light so it actually illuminates the skull like it's supposed to. That's better. So this is also one of the first ones I've seen in a while that use white light, because you've got white there and white there. Usually they're always yellow, like this one or this one or this one or that one. So, or these. So, but based on how this is functioning, I'm assuming we're going to have 2, maybe 3 motor assemblies. One to drive this mechanism up here, which does the rotating walkway and the fan. Then one down here to spin the wheel. Possibly one to make these two go up and down, but they may be attached off of a gearbox for the one that drives the wheel. I don't... it is possible there's just one right here in the bottom that goes all the way up and splits off and everything like they did with the toy factory. Not sure. But looking at this, I see they got glue on the wheel. So I've not really paid attention to it since I got mine. It's just been sitting. They got glue on the wheel. And I noticed they got a really crappy glue blob here for this. And then this hinge is kind of chintzy. It's loose and it doesn't close straight. And I can make it close straight, but it always opens up at an angle and gets stuck. So, but yeah, I got glue strings on the wheel. So anyhow, let's see what it's going to take to open this thing. So first thing, just turn it off. And then disconnect the power. So I can tell this comes off right here, because this is glued on separate. And I don't know if you can see it. You can see the glue blob right there. And there's no glue on that side at all. So this could be an access point. Probably not, though. I'm sure this is similar to the setup on the towers, both Christmas and Halloween ones. Use a light to look inside. This is driven off of a belt. I can see the belts right here, which is why this can move and bounce back. It's because you're stretching the rubber belt. That's probably a good idea. That way if you stop this from moving, it breaks a belt or slips the belt and not breaks one of those gears. Of course, I'm going to take this off so we don't damage or lose it. Get the spudger kit ready. Let's tear into this thing and see the easiest way to work on it. Looks like the majority of the mechanism's on the bottom. I'm looking through the windows. I can see a drive shaft that goes up to here, but it looks like the drive shaft comes off an assembly that's mounted right around the middle here. No, drive shaft goes all the way to the bottom. I see it in there. So it looks like there's going to be one motor assembly, and it splits off to here, here, and this. Which means if any part of this gets wedged, you're going to break a gear or you're going to burn out that motor. So, protect it's a resin and plastic house, so we got plastic, resin, resin, plastic, resin, plastic. So it's a blended house. I can feel the big outline on the bottom for the base. Let's see if the base will separate or if I need to apply some heat. Nope, we're gonna have to apply some heat. So it started, but it's not coming off. I'm going to try and just peel the edges to get to the glued area and not remove the whole bottom if I can. Now for me, this one was an impulse buy. This was the display. And I really wasn't sure I wanted it, but I figured since I had the other distillery from years past, there's been two I believe, might as well just complete the set. And it doesn't have any speaking, which is kind of nice. It just plays music. I like the Symphony of Screams because it plays music, but it has an intro. I like it when it just plays music, because sometimes hearing the repetitiveness of the audio part is annoying. So this is the most time-consuming part of it, probably. Got the majority of it off. I just need to get a little bit of the bottom and this one side. You could use a hairdryer for this, or one of the freestanding heat guns. If you have a rework station, you can use the rework station without a nozzle like this one. And I'm only heating up the edge that's actually attached to the resin base and not to the plastic bottom that is removable. Then if yours is adjustable, mine's set for, well, it's 151 degrees Celsius is what it's set for. Alrighty. We have now got it off of the resin corners. So the only thing left now is the glue that goes around this black base. Because this is a new piece, I'm going to assume the glue is still really pliable from its application. So I'm going to try and heat it up a little bit. See if I get a little bit heavier duty spudger in here. We actually did a decent job gluing this in. There's a relatively good bead of glue all the way around this one. There's a small gap right here where I was able to get the first spudger in. I'm actually surprised. It's hot. There we go. Now we're getting it to separate. Alright, let's get this out of my way so I don't burn myself. There we go. Broke the glue all the way around. Now let's see how this comes out. Oh, probably pretty carefully, I would assume. And there we go. So it is one little motor. Let's try and get it back on the center of the screen here. There we go. So I'm going to take that glue snot that they got on here off, since it's here. So we got one little motor. Here's your drive shaft. It comes out. That drives everything. So you got a small 300 CA motor that goes through a couple of gearboxes to drive everything. So I was right. These two are connected to each other. Here's your pivots. Here's the impossible gear. I said in one of the other videos that every piece this year has this gear. So your motor goes to the impossible gear, which then goes to the gearbox that's under here. This gearbox then uses, a transfer gear to transfer it to the axle right here, which does come out. And then it goes through a drive shaft to a ring and pinion gear, which then drives this belt, which is right here. So that's how you get the bottom out. And when you pull it out, be careful, because these two guys will catch the resin castings. And at least this one, mine, is really sharp and jagged. Wow. So now, if you're having a problem with yours, inside here, I'm going to try and tip it up. I'm going to unplug the bottom so I can tip it up. There's two wires that go to this bottom. One's the motor, and one is the speaker, which is in the upper left-hand corner. There are two circuit boards. There we go. So now I have the bottom completely isolated from the rest of the unit. So you have your main board right there and a distribution board right there, which is actually massive, and it could do a lot more stuff, but they just have it for the lighting. That's it. That distribution board just distributes all the different lights throughout the unit. So your incoming power is this cable here, which goes to your pin connector here because you got your volume and your power wires. You got your smoothing capacitor, your blow-up chip. You do have some components on the other side. Now what's nice about this one is they actually glued the circuit boards in. They're not flopping around like on the Ghoulish Gourd video. So if you need to pull them out, you might have to heat them a little bit. Heat them carefully so you don't overheat this blob chip and pull it out. But the glue, you might be able to just slowly stretch it. It is hot glue. On this one, it doesn't appear to have any small components on the back. Maybe a resistor if it does. And this is for all your different lighting. They do have color-coded connectors, but you still want to mark them because you do have a handful that are white with no other color coding. But then you have a red, a black, a gray, and another black, and the rest are white. So they are starting to color code, which is nice. I know a lot of people don't like the resin and or plastic houses, but I'm telling you, they're so much easier to repair. So if yours fails, because it's inevitable, you can take them apart easier. I'm just going to remove a piece of this glue that's hanging, because all this glue is going to get pulled out so I can glue the bottom back in and make it look pretty. So I can put it back in my display. So, if yours is making noise and it's making noise from the bottom, so we remove the bottom, your speaker, big black thing here, I'll remove the drive shaft just to get it out of my way. Your speaker is held in with 3 screws, and it is covered in glue because it looks like they glued the face on. They just glued the whole housing together, and they did an interesting job of it. There's a lot of glue strings in this house. So let's remove the speaker and get into the heart of this thing and see where your failure points are. So if you stop this wheel from turning, you probably won't damage the mechanism. You'll probably just eventually burn up or slip or break the drive belt. But if you stop one of these from moving, you might have a bigger issue. And if you stop this from moving, that drive shaft is steel. It's not going to be forgiving. The plastic around is going to be forgiving, and that's where you're going to encounter your problems. So first, I just removed the front screw, loosened the back 2 screws to remove the speaker housing with the 3rd screw. Now you can see here's your drive shaft bushing, your screw mounts, here's your plate. These 4 screws hold this plate on, which is the eccentric for the drinker and the skull. So what I can do is let's plug this back in and turn it on and see the mechanism actually work in person before we fully disassemble it. And then it'd be too late. So there's no sound because there's no speaker. So I'm going to try and zoom in a little here. Sorry, my camera cannot pan bottom and top, only left and right, the way I have it mounted. So as you can see, the motor has a pulley with a belt. Well, you can't see that, but it's driving, instead of a 10-tooth gear, it's driving the impossible gear directly, it appears. It could be wrong. We'll take it apart and verify. That is driving from the large tooth transfer. It's driving a large tooth set of gears up here so it can handle the torque of the drive shaft. Then the large tooth gear here has a ring gear with small teeth that then drives this drive shaft to another ring gear which drives the pulley. And I can't see what it is, but I see an eccentric that's moving this back and forth. But I can't see without disassembling, which we're going to do in a minute, what it is. Now, I do see it's got some light lubrication here, and these teeth are well lubricated down here in by the water wheel. I see they missed painting mine right here. It's brown, and then I got big black spots. So it is what it is. Which is fine. If you want to make this look older, you can take a dry brush technique and increase the black and make it look like it's old and decrepit wheel, since the water will erode the wood anyway for life. So the gears over here, I can't see any lubrication. I'm sure they are, but I noticed there's not big globs of lubrication. And this motor, the holes of the motor are pointing down, so it's less likely you're going to burn this motor out from storage, as long as you store it bottom side down. If you store it upside down, then the oil grease can get inside this motor and you'll fry it. So let's start tearing this thing apart and seeing how they put all the gears in here. Now, if yours is clicking, because I heard that's being an issue on some of them, the clicking could be plastic debris in the teeth, could be misaligned. Heck, it could be like mine where the hinge is bad on the lid and it's maybe getting caught. So try and isolate where your clicking is coming from. So that's the 4 screws to hold the top on. Here's your eccentric. So you can see how it's going to go in a circle. And as it goes in a circle in this oval cut, it moves it back and forth. Of course, there's no top, so it's lifting, because the top holds it down so it can handle the pressure of moving these guys up and down. So, and there's the eccentric right there. Apparently, to get into the main gearbox, we have 5 screws. And yes, if you can't see it, there is plenty of lubrication around this eccentric. Matter of fact, it's run over into like this screw here. That is what burns up motors, is that lubrication gets warm, becomes runny, and then it runs inside the electrics of a motor. And in some cases, it gets on the circuit board, and then, well, you either need a motor or a new piece, unless you can find a parts house to scavenge a circuit board out of. So here's the bottom. Here's your big drive gear that comes off of the Impossible gear, which is held on with a screw. That's a first. I'm not going to lie. That is a first that I've seen it's ever held on a screw. Here's your drive shaft transfer. Now this is unique too. This isn't a gear-driven drive shaft transfer. This gear has a cross hatching in it that this sits into. I mean, these cross hatchings are in most of the gears. Like right there, you can see the X. It's for strength, but they're using the strength bars as the drive point, so that's kind of unique and new. It doesn't mean it's bad or good, it's just really unique. Instead of adding more gears to drive that, they're just using the existing gears designed to drive it, so that's actually pretty neat. So there's the large gear with the cross hatching, right there. And then there is the ring gear to drive the pinion gear down there. Now, where this sits in the plastic, if it focuses, I get my hand centered. There's black ring. The black ring is from the plastic right there. So here's your drive shaft. So it's very similar to the Mad Pumpkin Patch, except that drive shaft is probably 3 times or 4 times longer than this, but it does the same thing to drive the barrel of pumpkins on the side. It uses a drive shaft. So that drive shaft then goes over here and over here. So if you're getting a clicking sound, most likely it's not from here unless you have a problem with these teeth or these teeth meshing, or if you have a piece of debris. That was pretty common on the Mad Pumpkin Patch. The pumpkins on the right would stutter. And that's because they had a casting defect that the drive shaft was catching the bottom plate. Now on this one, they're elevated, which is kind of nice, and they're held in with finger clips, which is good and bad. No screws, but when you pop this out, if you have to replace a gear or re-lubricate it, if you break off this tab, it won't go back in. Then you'll have to glue it in. And you'd have to glue it with something that's going to handle the torque transfer. So you'd probably have to glue it with something other than hot glue. Which means if you ever have to work on it again, it's going to get harder and harder and harder to repair. So there's pros and cons. So now, this you probably never have to work on, this piece here, unless you break them off. And if you do, then you can probably glue them on. This little head is on a pole, plastic pole, that's shoved into this hole, and there's some glue right around the edge. So I'm sure if you heated this up and used a pair of needle-nose pliers, you could probably pull this shaft out. And like if you broke it, as an example, you could replace this with maybe an old metal coat hanger wire or a toothpick, and you could wedge it back into the hole and put a dab of hot glue so you could pull it back out again if you break it again. Let's hope you don't break it. This guy is on a pedestal, and he's literally just glued on. He's off-center, so the back of him hangs off the back of the ledge. He's not hitting any of the casting holes, so I'm assuming it's fine. So let's take out the motor assembly so you can see how to replace this motor. We've got 4 screws, 1 in each corner. Helps with an old screwdriver. My fingers are greasy from removing the top pieces. Even though I wiped it off, it's still got grease on my fingers. Alright, so maybe this screw does hold it down to the shaft below because it doesn't come up. So let's take out this center screw. The center screw is different. There is a screw, or 2 maybe, that actually come in from the bottom. That's interesting. So see if I can just peel this back. Yeah, look at that. It's actually held in with the stickiness of the bottom. See the triangular hole? There's the triangular base. Look at that. So, if you can't get yours out, then that's probably the reason. As far as the gear and the screw in the center of the gear, it doesn't matter. It won't affect this unless you're disassembling. So, this is a first I've seen on Lemax. And if you break these gears, I'm going to tell you right off the get-go, they're going to be really hard to find. These are micro gears. And you think this gear is hard to find. These little guys are even harder. So, normally Lemax uses large gears, standard hobby size, but they are, well, standard teeth size. These are micro, and see if the camera will focus. See them? You see the edge of this tooth, or these teeth, compared to these teeth? See how much smaller those are? And these gears are really small. Like normally on the motor they have a pulley. This is all gear driven. This is a first. If you've taken apart any of these houses or watched the other videos, this motor usually has a pulley on the end of it that goes to a larger pulley with a belt that then drives the standard gears on top. This one is a complete gear drive, and I'm assuming the reason they're doing it this way is because of the amount of torque required to move all these moving components on this itty bitty motor. Now the motor is replaceable. There's 2 screws right there you can just pull out, and then the motor comes out. You just unpress and repress on this itty bitty, probably a 10 or 14 tooth gear. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 14. These micro gears are hard to find. They're usually in clock mechanisms, is where I find them when I have to go through stuff. Synchronous motors use them on the inside of the synchronous motor, but they're generally bigger as far as diameter goes. And that's about it. And it is using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 micro gears. And then this last micro gear is pressed onto this. So this is the new style 10-tooth, or sorry, impossible gear. The impossible gear just had a hole through the center of it. This one has a square. Come on. And it's inset, and then this micro gear has a square end. So this one's going to be even harder to find if you break it. So please don't stop your moving stuff. Because like Victor at Happy Holiday Parts is now manufacturing this impossible gear, but it's just got a round hole that's 2.5 millimeter for the standard shaft, not one with a square hole that is screwed in. So yeah, this is going to be a new issue if things go bad. So set that back in there, and we'll push it into the mat so the mat helps hold it in place. Now, I'm going to say if you're having clicking from the bottom, that you might have a chipped or cracked gear. Most likely you probably have casting material in here. That happened on several pieces. I've opened them up, and the resin jagged pieces like I was talking about right here on mine has chipped off and gotten stuck into the gearboxes. That does happen. So it is possible that your clicking, if you have one that is clicking, just has a piece of material from its manufacturing stuck inside of it, got caught in the grease. Maybe your mechanism is out of alignment, one of these screws isn't in all the way, or these standoffs broke and the gearbox is wobbling. If the gearbox wobbles, the teeth will clack as they skip over each other. If you do this and it's as greasy as mine, be careful. It makes it really hard to hold stuff. That's how the drive shaft transfer works. I'm just going to slide it in there, so I'm going to have to keep spinning it up here to make it line up with the teeth. There we go. So let's get this thing back together again. And make sure that it works and that nothing's out of alignment from the disassembly process. And then we'll look at the transfer up in the top from the metal drive shaft. And this belt looks like the same belt they would use on a pulley from the original style motor drive. There we go. Now, if you have to take yours apart, reassembly, the bottom is going to be easy. Getting that metal drive shaft to line up into the hole in the top is where you're going to have all your difficulties. So you're going to have to be patient. I'm going to have to be patient too. Alright, I think we're good. Let's test it out. If everything is turning, I'll put the drive shaft in. So everything's good. There's no speaker still, so of course there's no sound. But nothing's binding, nothing's clacking, nothing. So everything's lined up, everything's moving. I got the drive shaft is spinning. The two figures are going up and down, and the wheel is turning. So. So I'm going to put the speaker on, and we're going to look at the rest of this unit. Get back out. So, all the way in the bottom is your top piece. Now, the top piece is probably going to have to be removed from the top. Blue's nice. So, there is a gap between the handrail base and the resin top here. I'm just going to see if I can get a spudger in there and see if it flexes. Because the problem with heating when there's two different materials next to each other like that is the heat it takes to transfer will be absorbed easier by the plastic and distort, and the resin will not. And that's how you can warp your house. There it is. Alright, let's see if... Trying to see which piece comes off, the whole top, or if it's the catwalk area. I think it's going to be below the catwalk. Actually, before that gets hot. Little pin nozzle to point the heat where I need it. That's what I like about these rework stations, is they come with nozzles that allow me to direct the temperature to where I want the heat to go, and not to where it doesn't need to be. That's not moving much at all. Let's check the top here. I'll let the heat off because the plastic is starting to shift. there's an alignment bar on the back that aligns this so it's square. So I know this was put on after, and I'm wondering if this is the piece we need to take off first. Of course, I'm moving the guys back and forth so I can get my nozzle to move back and forth so I don't melt the glue that holds them on. Okay, we're going to let off a little on the heat because the plastic is starting to move. Basically, when the plastic gets hot, it starts to lift. Kind of wrinkles a little, but it's not warped yet. It's just getting close. So mine did break a little bit of the resin right here, but there's another distribution board right there. Look at that. And that distribution board has little components, looks like diodes and resistors and capacitors. And that controls the top lights. It's weird, it has 3 sets of wires that go in, but only 2 lights that stick out. There's that third set. Huh. We have a third set of wires that go up to this piece of plastic right here, but I don't see any lights in there. See if I can get this to disconnect and I can remove this top completely. You are going to need needle nose like this to get in there to unplug this. And then we have screws. So it looks like you're going to have to undo this top. Oops, wrong switch. To get in here. And as you can see, like I said, mine, this flat base cracked. Which kind of will help me line it back up. But right here is a raised piece which lines up the back so you know that it's in its octagon shape. So let's move the potentially melty piece there so I don't melt my flesh to it. And let's take out these top screws and see what we can see. So there's the transfer drive shaft. The other drive shaft drives the gears on the bottom. Those gears drive these guys, which in turn drive this. As you can see, it's moving. So. There we go. So here's the bottom. And then there's your upper gears. So the drive shaft, same thing as the bottom. It has the indentations which fit in here. This one on the other side, the metal shaft just rests, and then the teeth interlock in this spacer or reinforcement part. So there's that. It won't stay because there's no hole for it. So you have your planetary gear, singular, your drive gear, and then your outer ring gear, which is this whole plate, which may not be able to come out with these hands. All these hands that do the handrail. Kind of funny, it's a handrail. It's made with hands, you know, get it? So that is how you access the top. So if you have clacking in the top, what you might have is either one of these teeth have something stuck in it, piece of grit, casting material, etc., or this ring or one of these characters is smacking the knuckles on the hands. So the ring should stay centered and it should clear, but maybe this got distorted. It's just a resin plastic, or this base got distorted and it's pushing in a hair. So check where your clacking is. That was really common on the Horde Hotel, where the it would rub like the hourglass. So now it's time for reassembly. So first, stick that through. Now we have, that is the hole that presses on to the top of this gear, and that there is for your wire, so do not forget that. Alright, a little too much grease on the fingers. Now, because the bottom drive shaft isn't in there, the top big gear is moving around. And I think I just got it to drop into place. Nope. And I'm going to do the same thing I did with the bottom, actually. I'm going to set that in there and try and use that to help align. Like that. Perfect. I'm not going to lie to you, if you have to take the top off, it'd be easier if you left the bottom on, so that metal drive shaft can keep the drive gear centered. So try and isolate where your problem is. If your problem's on the top, take the top off. Don't take the bottom. If your thing's in the bottom, take the bottom off, not the top. Because when I reassemble it, it's going to be a little harder, but I don't think it's anything we can't handle. I think we're good. Let's see, is that turning? Yep, that is turning like it's supposed to. And then, of course, you have a whole bunch of glue. Also, you notice the glue goes across it. That could cause a problem too. It can get caught in any of the moving parts and give you a problem with your unit. But there's the 90-degree gearbox, the ring and pinion, and you have to heat this up and pull this cap off to fix the gears in here. You can tell there's no access right there. So when you do that, you have to carefully, you're probably going to end up losing this. You'll have to take that off, because when you heat around here, you're going to heat the glue that glues these on the two corners, because it's not attached at all to the back. So, but you can see it turns like it's supposed to. And honestly, it looks like they use two types of glue. This is soft glue, like hot glue, and this stuff is hard. I'm wondering, because this was a display, I'm wondering if it was just hot glue and that it got knocked off and then somebody used like super glue or something to hold it back together. Like I said, this was the display model. Alrighty, so before we forget, let's plug in the wire. Let's move these to the fattest gap. on. If I can get this thing to press in. Now let's see. Maybe tweezers will be easier. When somebody asks how do they do this in the factory, the circuit board wasn't glued in when this wire was plugged in. The circuit board was free floating, and then they hooked all the wires up and then glued it in. So. Right. There we go. So I'm using a small blade to try and push it up in, and I was using the pliers to hold it square. It's almost in. Oh, no, it just fell out. So, if you have to take your top off, this is probably going to be your hardest part. Patience and good hands helps. I'm usually low on both, so. And if you absolutely positively can't do it, you can heat up the circuit board with a hot air gun and pull the board out, plug it in, and then re-glue it down. Which truthfully I might be doing here in a moment. Since the wire keeps twisting on me. Let's see, does the circuit board have any movement? No, they glued that thing in good. Trying to see if maybe the corner would lift up just enough that I can plug it in, but no, they got a whole bunch of glue on this one. This one would have to be superheated to get all that glue to break free. Like I said, these things are never designed to be repaired. You're just supposed to throw them away. Give it one more try, and if this doesn't work, then I'm just going to put the bottom back in and I'll delaminate the circuit or de-glue the circuit board from the bottom. Okay, I have it lined up. See if I can slide it in. Holy smoke, it worked. So, as you saw how long that took me. See, it's plugged in. You can, yeah, it's all the way in. So I used the needle nose pliers, the tweezer style needle nose, and got it lined up onto the pins, and then I used a screwdriver and pushed it in a small blade. Now comes the next fun part. You got to get that drive shaft lined up into the top, and it wobbles. And that's the thing I was telling you about the bottom. And when we put the bottom back together, it's going to do the same thing. So, if you have a set of thin needle nose pliers, you might be able to reach the drive shaft and help align it through the window. I think I got it. Yes. So, there's my alignment. Perfect. You're probably thinking, oh, you didn't put any glue on it. You're right. I didn't put any glue on it because I wanted to see how hard it is to align. All glue has a time frame of setting. Hot glue can be fast or slow depending on the temperature of your glue gun, and super glue, depending on how old it is, can be super fast or super slow. So, but I now have an idea of how fast it is. I'm probably going to put just a couple of dabs of super glue on the points and call it good, because the super glue, if I just put a dab in each of the accessible 4 points in the front, it'll hold it in place and allow me to take it back off in the future. If I glued the whole thing, it'd be kind of permanent. So let's get the glue to the tip. Of course, I'm using Gorilla Glue. That's what I prefer. I find it works the best. Super Glue brand, Super Glue. I know it's the OG of super glues, but I just find it doesn't bond as good. So I have never had luck with the E9000 stuff. I know tons of people that swear by it. I absolutely can't stand it. It's never done what I wanted it to do. But your glue's your preference. Whatever you want to use is up to you. I prefer the glue with the brush, but my glue with the brush solidified, so I have to use this style, which is fine, because the brush would get in here so much easier. Like I said, I'm only putting a drop. I'm going to put a couple of drops on this side since this is where it cracked. And then I'm just going to press it in and hold it. You can use the activator if you have some. It shouldn't hurt any of the moving parts lubrication. And to make sure we're still good, I can move these or move this to make sure that when I tipped it, I didn't pull the drive shaft out and it's now off to the side. Now, if the bottom's still attached, you're going to have a hard time doing that, because when you do this, you're going to be turning this big metal shaft over here, and it's a lot more mass you're going to be rotating. So, but this piece isn't too bad. I mean, if you have it, I'm sure you might like it. That's probably why you bought it. Only reason I bought it originally, I wasn't going to, is I liked the soundtrack, and it blends in kinda with the other two breweries they have. They have the Blood Wine Inn, which is like a brewery for wine, and then of course the distillery from 2 years ago. So it's like, yeah, why not? The lighting is decent on it. I said it's one of like 2 or 3 pieces. They actually used a white light in 2 spots, which is ultra rare for Spooky Town. And paint job's okay. I think they could have done a little bit better with this green river. And as much as Spooky Town is, it's kind of weird to see an alligator. Rats, common. They're on a lot of pieces. But the alligators, wow, this stuff is not curing. Let's let it sit for a second. Alligator is kind of weird. But, well, you gotta try new things. Let's take a look at this door while that's setting up. Now, on mine, it gets caught up at an angle. And if I push it over, it drops. So it's something in this pin that it pivots on. I'm not sure what it is, but we're going to take a quick gander. Oh, my hinge is cracked. Awesome. So on the back side of the box is 2 loops that are stuck to the back of the box with a gap, and then the gap is filled with a loop that the metal pin goes through for the lid. My right side, looking at it, lower hinge, where it goes up to the box, is like this. The top of it's cracked off, and if I don't know if I can glue it on. I'd have to pinch and hold it, but if I glue it on and there's too much glue, it'll glue that metal pin, and then this lid won't pivot up and down. So I might just leave it until it actually fails, which it may never fail. I mean, it's not like it's under pressure. It's pushed up by the head of the drinker. And again, mine was a display, so it's possible that somebody screwed with it, flipped this open, tried to pull the lid off and cracked it. So that's fine. At least I was able to look at it. Everything else seems to be pretty rigid in here. Everything's pretty solidly glued. You know what those are. So this would also fit great if you have a pirate theme, because you got the rocks that match the pirates, you got the pylons and pillars, you got an alligator. The difference is that the water on those is usually bluish, and this is all green. But if you set up a town and you make your own river or water scene, whether it be resin or other, you could have it blend in. So, all right, see what it takes to get the bottom on. So, honestly, I'm going to probably have to use gravity. And what I mean by that is I'm going to have to use gravity to keep this centered, and then just put the top on from above. So, first things first, plug in the motor and the speaker. One thing I like about the new Lemax is everything uses Molex connectors. So much easier to work on when you have to take it apart, instead of desoldering or cutting wires. Next, I'm going to remove some of this glue. Get rid of that glue. I am going to quickly trim this jagged spot off of my resin because it's sharp, and if it ever chips off, it just fall into the mechanism like it did when I cut it. Get out. There you go. So I've done that on a few resin houses. The Be Afraid Clock Works, or Clocksmith, sorry. When I converted it to a real working clock, I broke all the castings out that would from the windows. I'm just checking any other jagged pieces sticking out. I got glue strings in this hole. I think the rest of the resin's good. It looks to be good. So I'm going to now, like I said, use gravity. First, I'm going to get rid of the phone so I can slide this over. And I'm going to try and center it. And because I can turn this, I missed. I am too far over. Okay, so gravity's not working for me because how much play is in this shaft. So I'm going to do it slightly at an angle. And I have a light illuminating through this big slot where I can see the top of that drive shaft. There we go. See, now it doesn't turn. And then when I try and turn it, you see the wheel. Hopefully you can see the wheel moving. So, there we go. Now she's in. not centered. Come on. My character isn't centered in the hole, and my wheel isn't centered in. Okay. Let's try it again. Nope, still not centered. So, before you glue it together, make sure that you get your base on so it doesn't bind. As you can hear, mine's binding because it is too far back in one corner. Right there. That should be good. Let's try it again. No, it's getting caught on these guys that go up and down still. There we go. So this guy was getting caught on everything. Looking down in here, I could see the shaft, but this one's harder to see because he's so big. So there's my center. So what I'm going to do to make it stay center is I'm going to use the rubber mat that still has adhesive on it and stick it down on one edge while I glue the other side. And then when the other side cures, I'll peel this corner up and glue this side. So let's just make sure, since I just stuck it down, with my hinge being broken, I can keep the lid open. There you go. So that is how you disassemble the brand new Headstone Mill Brewery for repair, access, etc., and how to put it back together. This is, like I said, what I do when I repair them. This is a straight through video. I didn't pause, stop for anything, including when my hands were slick and I used paper towel to wipe them down. Everything straight through. You got my opinions on this piece. It's growing on me. Again, doesn't fit my motif perfectly, but like I said, I thought about it for the mill, being the brewery, not necessarily the mill, but the brewery part, and I like the soundtrack. The lighting's not bad either, but I really like the soundtrack, and that's what made me buy it. No talking. Perfect. So, to work on it, you have to remove the bottom to get to anything down here. If your mechanism is failing up here, like this is spinning and these guys are going up and down, but the stuff up here is jerky or non-functional, you may have lost the drive shaft going from the bottom to the top, or the gear in here, the drive gear, planetary gear, one of those two has popped out of its place, broke, etc. So use a heat gun if you have one with a tight nozzle that you can direct. Go around the edges, careful, you might crack the resin like I did. I put it back together, you can't even really see the crack. If I look really close, the only reason I can see it is because there's a little bit of shininess next to it where the super glue squeezed out. So it's not going to affect the looks or function of the unit. The lower section, the drive belts right here, try not to bind this unit up, because if you do break a micro gear, which is more susceptible than the impossible gear, you're going to have a harder time fixing this. You're literally going to have to find a parts house or buy some clock part mechanism pieces to fix it. Apparently I forgot I turned this on. So that is how you do it. And of course, when you put it back together, make sure that you make it aligned before you glue it in. As you saw, mine wasn't aligned. So I'm going to now glue it in. I'm just going to glue this half or this side first. Then I'm going to make sure it's still aligned, and then I'm going to glue the other side. She's still good. So now we'll tip it up and I'll glue this side. Then I'll let that cure, then I'll glue the front and the back, and then I will put it back in my display. So this is the Headstone Mill Brewery Disassembly to diagnose or potentially repair anything that breaks inside, and how to get into it, and what parts you may or may not have to heat up to separate, depending on where your failure may lie. And in between, my opinion on the piece compared to other Lemax, and of course my opinion on the plastic and resin, which I actually prefer because it's more forgiving on disassembly. If this was a porcelain top and you pried it off, it would shatter instead of just cracking like it did. So again, I know people don't like the plastic, and I actually kind of sort of prefer it. Also, the plastic, they dye the plastic and resin, so it doesn't fade, chip, or peel like porcelain. So there's a lot of pros to plastic, and I understand die-hard collectors prefer the ceramic. I have all of the above, and it's just my opinion. And I'm only giving you the opinion based on longevity of the coloring and access to repair. Because it doesn't matter if it's a Lemax house or a Department 56 house or a car. Everything that's mechanical, electrical, or hydraulic will fail in time. So, also gluing, I'm using the glue to smear under the mat to hold the edges down. So that's why I keep setting it down and pushing on the edge, is to use the glue to re-adhere my mat. You can use spray adhesive for fabrics like Gorilla. I use Gorilla, I prefer it, but you can use any of them. There's generic ones out there you can get from hardware stores, but a 3M is really good too. I don't like the smell of 3M, and it sticks to everything. Where Gorilla Glue, the setup time's a hair longer, but it's so much easier. If you make a mistake, you can peel it back off and put it back on. So you get a little bit more, uh-oh, I screwed up time. But since I didn't peel the mat off the complete bottom, I'm not going to spray adhesive it back on. The hot glue around the edges will be fine, and I'll be good to go. So I've now glued all 4 sides. And one last check, and then we're going to call it good. Looking okay. Okay, that third light that I said I couldn't see where it was, it's inside the resin. That's the green around the windmill. There you go. That's what it looks like, and you can tell That white light is super overpowering in a camera. That's what I mean. It's really uncommon for them to use white. I can understand it here because it's not direct light. It's reflecting off the lid. But there you go. That is the brewery. You can see all the colors. You can see all the lights still function. Looks like they're supposed to. Try and get an in-camera frame for you. It's taller than the viewing angle. So, thanks for watching. Until the next one.